Welcome to Urban U, where stories of school and city unfold at the nation's largest urban university, the City University of New York. This month, a fascinating look at Mayor LaGuardia, with CUNY archives keeping New York's history alive. Our Next Gen CUNY series brings a story you don't want to miss: a sex trafficking survivor turned activist and educator at CUNY School of Professional Studies. At Hunter, we celebrate a 74-year-old who just earned her degree, and a comic book artist and City Tech professor shows how urban life and art collide on the page. Stay with us, it's Urban U.
One commentator said in 1935, there were two famous American politicians today, Fiorello LaGuardia and Franklin Roosevelt, although not in that order.
The name Fiorello LaGuardia lives on in New York City as the name of a public high school, a CUNY college, a public housing project, and an airport. But it's also what New York's 99th mayor stood for that is still relevant today, says author Terry Golway.
And the fact that he was very friendly with Franklin Roosevelt, the President of the United States, and was often by the President's side, led him to really become America's mayor. We know somebody else tried to steal that title, but the real America's mayor was Fiorello LaGuardia. He loved being a spokesman for America's cities at a time when America's cities needed a spokesman.
One might say that time isn't so different from today. This idea comes across in Terry Golway's book, I Never Did Like Politics, How Fiorello LaGuardia Became America's Mayor and Why He Still Matters.
It's astonishing and maybe a little frightening to see all of the issues he dealt with during his long public career, which began in 1917, how many of those issues are still here.
Golway, who teaches American history and political science at the College of Staten Island, says LaGuardia stood for integrity in government when New York needed it.
If Fiorello were here, or maybe in his grave, he's laughing right now because his biggest enemy was Tammany Hall, which was the political machine that ruled New York for so long. So I wrote a book about Tammany Hall, which basically says, yes, it was corrupt, but look at all the good things it did. My next book winds up being about the man who conquered Tammany Hall.
Now is the time to fight for the best interests of our city.
LaGuardia was the first Italian-American to serve in the U.S. Congress, and the first Italian to be mayor of New York. Golway says it was his time as a progressive in Congress during the 1920s that has some relevance to today.
Very much so, the culture wars that we're experiencing today would sound very familiar to LaGuardia where he's still here. And he saw prohibition as a cultural issue as well. Rural America telling people in urban areas, Italians with their wine, Irish with their whiskey, Germans with their beer, no, that's not acceptable behavior.
Congressman LaGuardia protested prohibition by publicly brewing his own beer.
A police officer walks by. LaGuardia says, "Officer, I'm brewing beer." To which the officer very cleverly responds, "Oh, really?" And he says, "Why aren't you arresting me?" And the police officer very also wisely says, that would be the job for the revenue agents, the feds. Beginning in 1923, New York State had a law in which state police and local police would refuse to cooperate in enforcing federal prohibition. That sounds a little familiar to us today.
The congressman also voted against the 1924 Immigration Act that put heavy quotas on immigrants from Southern and Eastern Europe and excluded Asian immigrants. LaGuardia ran as a long shot for mayor in 1929 against Tammany Hall's popular Jimmy Walker and lost. But by 1933, a few years into the Great Depression, investigations into city corruption had damaged the reputation of the existing political machines and government departments. This gave way to a LaGuardia victory.
We are going to try and demonstrate that a non-partisan, non-political, honest, clean government is possible in our city.
His integrity was unimpeachable. I mean, even his worst enemy would say, the guy is right, the guy walks the walk. So when he, for example, goes to the police headquarters on his very first day as mayor and says, this is a new era. If you think you're going to get a promotion because you know somebody in city government, quit now. If you think you're going to keep taking bribes to protect pickpockets down on Wall Street, quit now. And he goes down the list of things because those days are over.
I expect to initiate a gigantic public works program.
The new mayor pulled New York out of debt and restored its credit. He then worked with President Roosevelt in bringing jobs programs to New York under the Public Works and Works Progress administrations.
His friend, Franklin Roosevelt, fellow New Yorker, was writing very large checks through the WPA and other federal authorities that were part of the New Deal. At one point, LaGuardia says to Roosevelt, I want to build an airport in Queens. And Roosevelt says, go for it, man. We'll pay for it.
LaGuardia had inherited a New York where construction contracts and city jobs were common sources of patronage and corruption. But the new mayor made a point to change that.
Let all the money of the taxpayers go into schools instead of politicians.
He made sure that any money he got from the federal government was put to good use in projects people could see. The LaGuardia Airport, the Triborough Bridge, the boardwalk on Staten Island, all sorts of projects like that where people could see, oh, there's your tax dollars at work.
This included the rise of public housing under the New York City Housing Authority.
Houses with a window in every room and a bit of sunshine in every window to be rented at low rates within the means of small wage earners.
New Deal funding under LaGuardia also went towards CUNY, including the creation of Queens College. LaGuardia Community College houses an archive chronicling the namesake mayor. Galway says LaGuardia set the standard for mayors, but his legacy isn't without flaws. Desperate for new housing units, LaGuardia approved MetLife's plan to build segregated housing at Stuyvesant Town.
He was praised by the Amsterdam News, which was the big newspaper in Harlem, as basically the best mayor for black people that New York had ever seen. But Stuytown was a big one, and I can't honestly explain what he was thinking, except to say that maybe all he could see was units.
But Galway says the little flower should be remembered, not just for infrastructure and for that time he read the comics over the radio, but as someone who fought for urban America.
If Fiorello LaGuardia were alive today and saw the way this country is being governed in Washington, and heard the rhetoric that is coming out of the mouths, not just of people in Washington, but in his own home state of New York, he would look out, look us in the eyes, and say, what happened? Have you forgotten who you are?
For Urban U, this is Shannon Ayala.
Hi everyone, I'm Isabel Ortiz and welcome to Next Gen CUNY, where we spotlight CUNY changemakers who are breaking barriers in their careers and their communities. Today I have the honor of being joined by a wonderful guest. He's a member of the CUNY School of Professional Studies community, a human trafficking survivor, and a dedicated advocate for trafficking survivors, immigrants, and the LGBTQ community. With all that being said, I am thrilled to welcome Christian Eduardo. Hi, Christian. Thank you so much for being here today.
Hi, hola, mucho gusto. Encantado de estar aquí.
So for people who aren't familiar exactly with your background, how has your journey led to this moment, to you being an advocate for trafficking survivors?
Sadly, I experienced trafficking twice. And for the people that doesn't know, human trafficking is when someone profit from another individual or individuals through exploitation. It can be sex and labor exploitation. So, and this can be done through force, fraud, coercion. It a lot of times I think that when we talk about human trafficking, people think change, kidnapping. Those situations happen, but a lot of times, in my situation especially, it was fraud and coercion. So I was trafficked the first time in the restaurant cleaning industry for the purposes of forced labor, and the labor trafficking within time it also become sex trafficking. So that happened the first time. The reality is that I just escaped because of the sexual violence, and everything was really escalating a lot. So I arrived here to the United States, and I was diagnosed HIV positive. I didn't know what to do. I was here with no friends, no family.
Yeah.
I wasn't fluent in English, and sadly, I ended up again in a trafficking situation. Why? Because I didn't know how to access HIV medication. I wasn't able to communicate my needs. I didn't know that there were able to help immigrants, people who speak Spanish. So all these things in conjunction, my traffickers took advantage of that. They were like, "Oh, we can provide you a safe place to live. We can give you or provide you access to HIV medication," and that led me to also being exploited in the bar nightlife industry
Okay.
for forced labor. And as my previous experience, it's slowly moved towards also sex trafficking.
How do you go from being scared to now doing the work that you're doing? You're an advocate. What was that transition like?
I got engaged with organizations and people that didn't force me to identify as a survivor or didn't put labels on me, but rather came acknowledging that I was a full human regardless of past abuse and those experiences, and really asking me, what do you need now? Rather than them being like, oh, you need to do this, like you are this, you're a survivor, you're a victim, like you now need to do this. There, I remember that the person who became my lawyer on one of our initial interviews, instead of asking me like, so what happened to you, where are you from, like what is your name, what is your age, like just all these check boxes, and be like, oh, you may qualify, you may not. What she did was, are you hungry? And I remember that I didn't know what to do in that time. I was like, what is happening? Like, when was the last time that somebody asked me this? And I think that that was a pivotal moment because it reminded me of my humanity, that I was like, yes, I'm worthy of being taken care of. And more than just my trauma, and more than just what happened to me. And even if I don't understand fully what happened to me, I have the right to be seen as a human and not only looking for check boxes. The reality is that, as I say, through therapy, with my lawyer, doing advocacy, meeting other people that were also struggling and at the same time fighting for their rights, it's when I decide, like, you know what, I want to understand more about human trafficking. I want to understand my own story, and I want to advocate for this because this is gonna let me to connect with more people, and by sharing my story, other people can understand, and knowing if even if they were trafficked or they have been trafficked, that things can get better.
You spoke about how when you were sitting down with the lawyer that human interaction was something that you needed in the moment, but also admired. And now you are taking kind of that same energy and bringing it into your role on the U.S. Advisory Council for Human Trafficking. Can you tell me a little bit about that role and what does your
Yes.
day-to-day look like?
Yeah, so the United Advisory Council is a platform for survivors of human trafficking or people with lived experience to provide recommendations around policy legislation of approaches. What we do is really give and provide recommendations for federal agencies, Department of Homeland and Security, Health and Human Services, Department of Labor, how they are combating human trafficking, and just meeting people where they are, like not forcing anyone to be identify or being labeled as a victim or a survivor, but really providing the resources and a path, knowing that they are out there.
Something that I seems to be a continued thread in this is not everybody's story is an exact formula. Not everybody, it's not an easily checked box. Everybody's situation is going to be different. What they're willing to share is going to be different.
One of the big challenges in human trafficking is the disclosing of your story. As an immigrant, for example, myself, in order to stay legally here in the United States, as a victim of human trafficking, one of the requirements is collaborate with law enforcement. That was one of the hardest part for me. I was like, I don't want to, what if they deport me? What if they don't believe my story? And that is the fear. My traffickers used to say that nobody's going to believe you. And for years, it was the reality.
So when you look back and you close your eyes, and if you were to give advice to somebody who is going through the same situation as you, what is one thing you can say to somebody who may be struggling?
I would say that don't doubt yourself. For me, there's no explanation in that moment, even if I go back to myself and I'm like, why did I escape? Like, what was different that morning? And I remember that I wake up, I sit down, and I was like, it was my inner self that it was telling me, like,
Yeah.
you need to get out of here, like, now. Like, there's no more. Like, I'm not a religious person, so I don't have that approach that something divine came and told me, like, you need to live. Like, it was my inner self. It was my own self.
Your intuition.
Yes, telling me, like, you need to get out of here now. Yeah. So for everyone, like, struggling, going through something that is making you not uncomfortable, but it's the beyond, like, you know that it's danger. Yeah. Like, know that there's support, that there's people out there that are going to support you, that they're not going to force you to put a label on you, but that there are a lot of resources.
It was such a pleasure getting to speak with you. I learned so much just from sitting down with you, so I know that anybody watching, I'm sure, will take away a ton of information. But like I said, thank you so much for sitting down with me today. It was such a pleasure getting to speak with you.
Thank you.
What some people take for granted is a dream come true for others. And as one Hunter College graduate learned, it's never too late to make your dreams come true.
And I want to take a moment to highlight a very special graduate. And her name is Dorotea Levy de Zaleski. Dorotea is realizing a 50-year dream.
People who didn't know me thought that I was going to sit, at the professor's desk, but no, I was one of them.
At 74 years young, Dorotea Levy de Zaleski is a proud graduate of Hunter College, class of 2025, fulfilling her deep, decades-long desire to earn a bachelor's degree.
It's been a long time in the making, but here at CUNY, this dream became a reality.
The grandma of three started her collegiate journey in 2017 at the age of 66, enrolling at Borough of Manhattan Community College, earning an associate's degree and graduating as co-valedictorian with a 4.0 GPA. She went on to graduate summa cum laude with a bachelor's degree at Hunter, triple majoring in English with a concentration in creative writing, German literature and language, and studio art. An improbable accomplishment for Dorotea, who was born and raised in Argentina by parents who escaped Nazi Germany, and says an early negative experience dissuaded her from pursuing a higher education.
Already in first grade, I was told that I did not have the intellectual ability to finish high school. So I struggled through grade school and high school and took that script as my motto, and I never went to college.
a decision that weighed on Dorotea over 5 decades. Even as the mom of 3 managed a gratifying career as a trilingual secretary and teacher, she still felt like something was always missing. It wasn't until her late 60s that Dorotea, with encouragement from her children, took a leap of faith.
I was scared to death. And she took me by the hand and she said, "You can do it. This is the place to do it."
And her daughter's call to action was spot on. Throughout the CUNY system, 23% of all students are adult learners over the age of 25. And at Dorotea's alma mater, Hunter College, there are currently over 160 students aged 50 and older. Despite the encouraging statistics, this college student says it's just numbers, and she prefers to live by the motto, "Don't let age be your cage."
If I'm to inspire someone, it's not because of my age, but because of who I am. And age should not be an impediment in chasing your dreams.
And Dorotea is living proof that age is no impediment. The graduate said throughout her time at BMCC and Hunter, she made lasting friendships with classmates who felt like equals.
I trusted them and they trusted me. I didn't feel the age difference. Of course, the age difference is there. And of course, being with young people is always like a blood transfusion.
An infusion of energy that will support this lifelong learner as she plans to continue her journey at CUNY by pursuing a master's degree in English.
There's so much that learning, knowing a little bit more and accepting how little you know, that's very rewarding.
Dorotea hopes her story will inspire others looking to go to college later in life and says CUNY is a place to make it happen.
They accept people of all ages, of all backgrounds. And this is a golden opportunity that you should not let go. The CUNY system is the most perfect place to learn, to be accepted, no matter who you are. It's where my dreams came true.
For Urban U, I'm Susan Junn.
I would best describe myself as someone who is a storyteller working in comics. All of my work in World War III Illustrated specifically has been narratives about life in New York, from the perspective of being a Latino American, born here, a child of an immigrant. My first comic in World War III Illustrated in 1991 was about the Iraq War. The first time I was published was really magical. We were at Tower Records and we were at Forbidden Planet. To walk down the street and see the cover of the issue that you're in, or to walk into a place and see someone physically thumbing through it, there's nothing like it. I think I've been chasing that feeling ever since. My series Marley Davidson Bronx Exorcist is a more allegorical story that really is me trying to use metaphors in horror, in genre, to speak to our time. The first issue was 1995. That was largely self-published and self-distributed. This was like me and my friends getting together, physically doing our paste up, going to Kinko's, making the copies, and then literally me going hat in hand to like Pep Boys and saying, "Hey, you've got a magazine rack. You mind if you guys don't have any comics, but you carry Marley Davidson?" Cartoons are inherently an abstraction. They're making something cartoony, for lack of a better way of saying it. The way I've done it in World War III Illustrated is I use this very almost Disney style of these characters, and I tell these really terrible stories. And that's the way I get to invite the reader in and then have my cake and eat it too and talk about something serious and get them to stick around. Comic books are a very solitary activity. We don't get applause, we don't get to work it out in front of people. We kind of do it, we present it to people, and they either love it or hate it. Your friendship with other artists is very important. Every semester at the Graduate Center, we try to have at least a couple of what we call draw jams. The Draw Jam is an opportunity for people across CUNY to come together and share their love of comics and drawing. Some people are working on very tight sequential stuff that they have an idea for that's more comic book-like and graphic memoir-like in nature. Some folks are just sort of dealing with sort of general sort of illustration about trying to express something ineffable about their research or the thing they're working on at this time. Part it's really just to connect and be in each other's presence. This mural was a result of one of the last Draw Jams. There was, a lot of, anxiety and concern after the attacks in Gaza and, the response to the attacks versus Israel. And basically a lot of people just got together to sort of let their feelings sort of out onto a sheet of paper. You could call it therapy, you could call it all kinds of things, but it's basically just people making art and getting that sort of energy out of themselves as opposed to holding it in. The Draw Jams have been very important to me because certainly coming out of the pandemic, the community we had built in New York around comics really got fractured again. Having a Draw Jam and providing a place for people to draw together has been incredibly cathartic. It's important professionally. People connect there and, maybe that's how you find the next person you're going to collaborate with. The project I'm working on now is Urban Scrimmage, and it is the first true nonfiction thing I have ever attempted. I didn't have the modality or the tools to really do nonfiction until I came to the Graduate Center and came to the biography and memoir program. And then I started to figure out, thanks to the work of really good professors, they were able to help me wrestle with the ethics and the framework that I needed to tell basically a documentary in comics. The South Bronx informs what I do because it was very much the place where I met the world. I was pretty much born and raised there and lived there until I was in my early 20s. And I lived there during a lot of the devastation of the arson fires. So that's now making its way into the focal point of the graphic memoir that I'm working at. It sort of tracks our move from the tenements when we were in the most peril, my mother and I, to when we moved to the housing projects. This project is really me trying to take a factual look at the events of my life and put them together on paper so that they stand not only as a historical record, but that they speak to my generation and my peers and my family and the people I know and the time we lived in. As I tell my students, you can fail at something you hate, so pursue the thing that you like. I want to keep building upon the stuff I've done at World War III Illustrated and turn that into a more cohesive body of work that people can return to and get some understanding about the world as I see it. That's my mission as an artist.
The book really does center ordinary people doing extraordinary things. So really a complicated network of folks who were just really committed to a more just world. Free Black communities were arguing for some of the very freedoms that we perhaps take for granted today, like the right to vote, birthright citizenship, the right to get a job that reflects your talents and capabilities. What they did center in terms of their neighborhoods are some of the things that we would value today. The right to space, the right to be able to gather and create community. And so the themes that we see in Brooklyn in the early 19th century are the church. The Black church is at the center of everything. It is at the center of faith and politics, a mutual aid society so that members of the community can support one another on hard times, and of course education. Education is key throughout this century.
Thanks for watching and for being part of the CUNY community on Urban U.